The massive crystal dome stretched high above the Grand Council chamber on Nexus Prime. Light from 12 different suns filtered through its surface, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floors below. This was the heart of the Galactic Empire, where decisions were made that affected trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy had gathered for today's session. The chamber was enormous, with seating arranged in perfect circles that rose toward the dome. At the very top sat the ethereal Zephyrians, their translucent blue forms glowing softly in the filtered starlight. These beings communicated through thought alone and had ruled the galaxy for over 8,000 years. Below them, the second tier belonged to the Corvin Federation. These massive armored creatures stood nearly 3 meters tall and commanded the Empire's military forces. Their red eyes glowed behind face masks that covered features too fierce for most species to look upon directly. Admiral Vextar, their chief representative, reviewed data on a holographic display that floated before his seat. The third tier housed the Synthetic Collective, beings of living metal and crystal, who had transcended their original biological forms millions of years ago. Their mechanical voices created harmonies that sounded like music to some species and grinding metal to others. They controlled most of the Empire's technology and manufacturing. Hundreds of other species filled the remaining tiers, each placed according to their perceived value to galactic civilization. The higher your tier, the more your voice mattered in council decisions. The lower tiers existed mainly to provide resources, labor, or entertainment for those above them. Today, the council would evaluate a new species for membership. This happened perhaps once every few decades when some primitive race finally developed faster-than-light travel and stumbled into the greater galaxy. The process was always the same: evaluation, classification, assignment to the appropriate tier, and integration into the Empire's vast hierarchy. High Counselor Zephy, the eldest of the Zephyrians, allowed his consciousness to drift across the assembled minds. The anticipation was mild at best. According to the preliminary reports, this new species called themselves humans and came from a small, unremarkable planet in a backwater spiral arm of the galaxy. Their technology was laughably primitive, their lifespans barely a century, and they possessed no psychic abilities whatsoever. Admiral Vextar's deep voice rumbled through the chamber's communication system. The species designation human has been brought before this council for evaluation and placement within our empire. Initial scans show a population of approximately 8 billion individuals confined to a single world, with limited expansion to nearby celestial bodies. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the humans' home system. Their star was a common yellow dwarf, nothing special. The planet they called Earth was a standard terrestrial world with excessive water coverage. Several other planets in their system showed signs of primitive exploration attempts. Their technology level places them roughly equivalent to the Bravak species at the time of their integration 3 centuries ago, continued Vextar. Chemical propulsion systems, electromagnetic communications, and basic nuclear fission. No evidence of quantum manipulation, dimensional folding, or consciousness transfer capabilities. Soft laughter rippled through some of the lower tiers. The Bravak were known throughout the galaxy as one of the least advanced species ever admitted to the Empire. They now served primarily as manual laborers on mining worlds. Counselor Hixrun of the Synthetic Collective added her observations in a voice like silver bells. Biological analysis confirmed standard carbon-based life forms with no apparent genetic modifications or evolutionary enhancements. Average lifespan of 75 to 80 standard years. No evidence of hive mind capabilities or collective consciousness. They appear to function as individuals with primitive social structures. More laughter from the gallery. Individual consciousness was considered a sign of evolutionary immaturity. Advanced species had long ago learned to link their minds for greater efficiency and harmony. The hologram shifted to show images of human cities, with their crude metal and glass structures reaching modestly into the sky. Compared to the living crystal spires of Zephyrian cities or the flowing bioarchitecture of other advanced worlds, human settlements looked like the work of children playing with blocks. Military capabilities? Asked General Korthbach of the Hegemony, a species known for their tactical expertise. Minimal threat level, Vextar replied. Their most advanced weapons rely on chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles. No energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no reality manipulation devices. A single Corvan battlecruiser could pacify their entire planet within hours. The evaluation continued for another hour, with various council members adding their assessments. The humans showed some interesting quirks. They had apparently fought numerous wars among themselves, which some species found amusing, but nothing that would elevate them above the lowest tiers of galactic society. Dr. Yilseth of the Medical Alliance noted their unusual psychological profiles. The species shows remarkable aggression toward members of their own kind, yet also displays what they call compassion toward the weak and injured. This contradictory behavior suggests mental instability or evolutionary confusion. The Zephyrians found this particularly puzzling. In their society, the mentally or physically inferior were simply allowed to fade away naturally. Wasting resources on those who could not contribute was considered barbaric. As the formal evaluation neared its end, a small transport ship appeared on the chamber's external viewing screens. It was clearly of human construction, angular, awkward-looking, and powered by what appeared to be controlled chemical explosions. The contrast with the sleek organic curves of Zephyrian vessels or the geometric perfection of synthetic ships was almost comical. "The human delegation has arrived," announced the chamber's AI system. "Ambassador Elena Vasquez and her small diplomatic team request permission to address the council." High Counselor Zephai's thoughts touched the minds of his fellow Zephyrians. The decision was already made, of course. Humans would be classified as a protected species, forbidden from expanding beyond their home system without council permission. Their technology would be capped at current levels to prevent them from becoming a nuisance. They would be studied, observed, and perhaps occasionally called upon to provide manual labor for important projects. It was a generous arrangement, really. Many species had been wiped out entirely when they proved too troublesome or too primitive to be useful. Humans should be grateful for the opportunity to exist under the Empire's protection. "Permission granted," the High Counselor announced. "Let the humans present themselves for judgment." The great doors of the chamber began to open with a sound like distant thunder. Soon, the representatives of this newest species would stand before the assembled might of galactic civilization and learn their place in the greater order of things. In the highest tier, the Zephyrians prepared to deliver their verdict with the calm certainty of beings who had shaped the destiny of countless worlds. They had no way of knowing that they were about to encounter something completely outside their experience, a species that had never learned to accept the limitations others placed upon them. The evaluation was over. The judgment would soon be rendered. And somewhere in the vast chamber, ancient systems began to record what would later be known as the last day of the old galactic order. The chamber doors finished opening with a deep resonating hum. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped into the vast space, her simple dark suit a stark contrast to the elaborate robes, biomechanical forms, and energy patterns worn by the galactic representatives around her. She was small by most species standards, standing barely 1.7 meters tall, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her without showing fear or awe. Behind her walked two other humans, a military advisor and a cultural attaché, but all eyes in the chamber focused on the ambassador herself. She moved with quiet confidence across the polished floor toward the central platform, where species came to receive the council's judgment. High Counselor Zephai allowed his consciousness to touch her mind briefly, expecting to find the usual mixture of nervousness and gratitude that new species displayed when brought before the council. Instead, he encountered something unexpected, a mind that was calm, focused, and strangely difficult to read. The human's thoughts seemed to flow in patterns that didn't match any known species profile. "Interesting," he mused to his fellow Zephyrians. "Their mental structure is more complex than the initial scans suggested." Admiral Vextar's voice boomed across the chamber. "Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the species designation human. You stand before the Galactic Council to receive evaluation and placement within our empire. Do you understand the significance of this moment?" Elena looked up at the towering Corvan warrior, then let her gaze sweep across the assembled representatives. "I understand that you're about to make a decision about humanity's future." "Yes." Some of the council members exchanged glances at her directness. Most new species approached this moment with elaborate ceremonies, lengthy speeches about their honor at being considered worthy of attention, and promises of eternal loyalty to the Empire's wisdom. Very well, continued Vextar, so the Council has completed its evaluation of your species. We will now present our findings. A new hologram appeared in the chamber's center, showing detailed scans of human technology, biology, and social structures. The data painted a picture of a species that had barely crawled out of planetary infancy. Dr. Yilseth of the Medical Alliance began the formal presentation. Humans are biological entities with an average lifespan of 78 standard years. They possess no telepathic abilities, no genetic modifications, and no evidence of evolutionary enhancement beyond basic natural selection. Their reproduction is inefficient, requiring 2 individuals and an extended development period for offspring. Soft murmurs of amusement rippled through the lower tiers. The idea of requiring 2 separate beings to create offspring seemed absurdly wasteful to species that had long ago mastered cloning, consciousness transfer, or collective reproduction. Counselor Hicksrun of the Synthetic Collective added her analysis. Human technology shows limited understanding of fundamental forces. Their computers operate on primitive binary systems, their vehicles require chemical combustion, and their communications depend on electromagnetic radiation. They have achieved basic spaceflight, but only through the crude method of explosive propulsion. The hologram showed images of human rockets launching from Earth's surface, trailing fire and smoke. To beings accustomed to ships that folded space or rode gravity waves, the sight of humans literally blasting themselves into space seemed almost comically primitive. General Korthvac of the Hegemony presented the military assessment. Human combat capabilities are minimal. Their weapons are kinetic-based or rely on chemical explosives. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, and no reality manipulation devices. Of greater concern is their tendency toward internal conflict. Our records show over 15,000 separate military engagements in their recorded history. This drew actual laughter from several sections of the gallery. The idea of a species fighting among itself was seen as a sign of severe evolutionary failure. Advanced civilizations had long ago learned that cooperation was far more efficient than conflict. Most disturbing, added General Korthvac, is their apparent inability to accept hierarchical authority. Human social structures show constant rebellion against leadership, frequent changes in government, and widespread rejection of expert guidance. This suggests a fundamental inability to integrate into civilized society. Elena listened to each assessment without expression, occasionally making notes on a small device she carried. She showed no signs of the embarrassment or defensiveness that the Council expected. If anything, she seemed to be studying them as much as they were studying her. High Counselor Zephai finally rose from his position in the highest tier. His translucent form began to glow more brightly as he prepared to deliver the Council's decision. Ambassador Vasquez, the Council has reached its conclusion regarding humanity's place in our empire. The chamber fell silent. This was the moment when a species learned whether they would be granted full membership, limited membership, or in rare cases whether they would be deemed too dangerous or primitive to survive. Your species shows potential, the High Counselor began, his telepathic voice reaching every mind in the chamber. While your technology is primitive and your social structures chaotic, we recognize that every species must begin somewhere. Therefore, the Council offers humanity the status of protected species. Elena raised an eyebrow slightly. And what does that mean exactly? It means, continued Zephai, that humanity will be placed under the Empire's protection and guidance. Your expansion will be limited to your current solar system to prevent interference with established civilizations. Your technological development will be carefully monitored and controlled to ensure it proceeds along safe and beneficial lines. In return, the Empire will provide protection from external threats and gradual introduction to galactic civilization as your species proves. Ready for greater responsibilities, the terms were actually quite generous by galactic standards. Many species had been entirely forbidden from space travel or had their population limited to specific numbers. Humans were being offered the chance to exist and slowly prove themselves worthy of eventual advancement. You will be assigned a Council oversight team, added Admiral Vextar. They will help guide your development and ensure that your aggressive tendencies are properly channeled toward productive activities. Your military capabilities will be limited to internal security forces. and all advanced technology will be provided through official Empire channels. Think of it as a mentorship program, offered Dr. Yilseth. More advanced species will help guide your growth until you're ready to take your place in galactic society. It may take a few thousand years, but eventually humans could earn positions in the lower tiers of the Council. The offer hung in the air like a gift waiting to be accepted. Around the chamber, representatives from hundreds of species nodded approvingly. This was how the system worked. New species were brought in slowly, carefully, safely. The Empire had maintained peace and order for millennia using exactly this approach. Elena finished making her notes and looked up at the assembled council. Her expression remained calm and thoughtful. I appreciate the time and effort you've put into this evaluation. Your offer is comprehensive. High Counselor HFY felt a flicker of satisfaction. The human was showing proper respect at last. The Council's wisdom has guided countless species to prosperity and peace, Ambassador. We are confident that humanity will benefit greatly from our guidance. I'm sure you believe that, Elena replied quietly. She closed her notebook and stood a little straighter. Before I respond to your offer, may I ask one question? Of course, said the High Counselor graciously. In your thousands of years of galactic civilization, how many species have ever refused the Council's guidance? The question caused a moment of confusion. Several Council members looked at each other uncertainly. The concept was so foreign that many didn't understand what she was asking. Refused? Repeated Admiral Vextar. I don't understand the question. Why would any species refuse the opportunity to join galactic civilization? Elena nodded slowly as if that answer told her everything she needed to know. I see. Thank you for clarifying that. The chamber waited expectantly for her formal acceptance of the Council's generous offer. After all, what choice did she really have? Humanity was one small primitive species facing the accumulated might and wisdom of an entire galaxy. Any rational being would recognize the futility of resistance and the benefits of cooperation. Elena Vasquez looked up at the thousands of representatives surrounding her, representing civilizations that spanned the galaxy and commanded power beyond human comprehension. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the perfect acoustics of the chamber, reaching every ear and every recording device. Thank you for your offer, she said calmly, but we decline. The silence that followed Elena's words was unlike anything the Council chamber had ever experienced. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, 10,000 years of galactic civilization ground to a halt as every mind in the chamber tried to process what they had just heard. We decline. Two simple words that might as well have been spoken in an alien language for all the sense they made to the assembled representatives. In the entire recorded history of the Galactic Empire, no species had ever refused the Council's wisdom. The very concept was as foreign as trying to refuse gravity or the passage of time. High Counselor HFY was the first to recover, his consciousness reaching out to touch Elena's mind more deeply, searching for some explanation for this impossible response. Perhaps there had been a translation error. Maybe the human language lacked the proper concepts to understand what had been offered. Ambassador, he said carefully, his telepathic voice carrying a note of confusion that even non-psychic species could detect. I believe there may have been some misunderstanding. The Council has offered your species protection, guidance, and eventual integration into galactic civilization. This is not a negotiation. This is our gift to humanity. Elena looked up at the glowing Zephyrian form with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the proceedings. I understood perfectly, High Counselor. You're offering to make humanity into pets. Well cared for pets, but pets nonetheless. And as I said, we decline. The word pets rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Several representatives from the lower tiers shifted. Uncomfortably, that particular comparison struck. Uncomfortably close to home for species who had long ago accepted their role as servants to their betters. Admiral Vextar's massive form rose from his seat, his red eyes blazing behind his facial armor. Human, you do not seem to grasp the situation. You are one species from one world in an obscure corner of the galaxy. The Empire spans thousands of systems and commands power that could reduce your entire civilization to cosmic dust. You speak as if you have choices in this matter. Don't we? Elena asked simply. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the chamber, representatives who had never questioned the natural order of things found themselves confronted with a concept that threatened the very foundation of their understanding. Dr. Yilseth leaned forward in her crystalline frame, Ambassador, perhaps your species' limited lifespan prevents you from understanding the long-term implications. The Council's guidance has brought peace and prosperity to the galaxy for millennia. War, disease, and poverty have been virtually eliminated under our system. Surely you cannot prefer chaos to order. Your order, Elena corrected, built on your definitions of peace and prosperity. But you're right that our perspective might be different. We've had to make our own way in the universe without anyone to tell us what we could or couldn't achieve. General Korthvak's tactical mind was already running scenarios. If you refuse our protection, you leave yourselves vulnerable to the various threats that exist in the galaxy. There are rogue civilizations, cosmic phenomena, and forces that could destroy your species without our shields. There are threats everywhere, Elena agreed. But hiding behind someone else's strength isn't the only way to deal with them. Counselor Hicksran's metallic voice chimed with algorithmic precision. Your current technology level makes independent survival highly improbable. Our calculations show a 94.7% chance that humanity will encounter circumstances beyond their capabilities within the next 500 years. Your calculations are based on the assumption that our capabilities won't change, Elena replied. That's where we might disagree. High Counselor HFY felt growing frustration as his attempts to understand the human's logic continued to fail. Her mind remained strangely resistant to deep reading, and her responses seemed to come from a completely different framework of understanding. Ambassador, he said with the patience of one accustomed to dealing with confused primitives, you speak as if your species has some hidden potential that our evaluation missed. I assure you our methods are thorough and proven. We have assessed thousands of species over the millennia. Humans are not unique. Elena smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not the grateful smile of a primitive being granted a boon, nor the nervous smile of someone trying to please their superiors. It was the quiet, confident smile of someone who knew something others didn't. You're absolutely right, she said. Your methods are proven. You've been using the same evaluation criteria for thousands of years, and they work perfectly for measuring what you think is important. But you made one crucial error in your assessment of humanity. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of beings who suddenly realized they might be missing something important. You evaluated what you thought was our ceiling, Elena continued, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. You looked at our current technology, our current social structures, our current limitations. You measured us against your standards and found us wanting, but you never asked the one question that actually matters. Which is, demanded Admiral Vextar. You never asked about our floor. The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Around the vast space, thousands of representatives from hundreds of species felt something they hadn't experienced in millennia: uncertainty. Elena began to walk slowly around the central platform as she spoke, her movements confident and purposeful. You see primitive technology and assume we're limited by our understanding. But we didn't build rockets because we couldn't figure out anything better. We built them because we refused to be stuck on one world. We strapped ourselves to controlled explosions and rode them into the void, because the alternative was accepting that we couldn't reach the stars. She paused, looking up at the various tiers of representatives. You see our internal conflicts and assume we're too savage for civilization. But we didn't fight wars because we couldn't learn to cooperate. We fought them because some things are worth fighting for, and because we'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees. The chamber was absolutely still now. Even the ever-present hum of the station system seemed muted. You see our short lifespans and think we lack perspective. But our mortality doesn't make us weak, it makes us urgent. Every day matters when you don't have forever. Every choice counts when you can't take back the ones you made. Elena stopped walking and faced the highest tier directly. You've built a wonderful empire, High Counselor. Peaceful, stable, orderly. You've eliminated war, disease, and poverty. You've created a system where everyone knows their place and no one has to struggle. Yes, HFY said, though his voice carried less certainty than before. That is what civilization means. That's what your civilization means, Elena corrected. But it's not the only possible meaning. You've created peace by making sure no one ever has a reason to fight. You've eliminated poverty by controlling who gets to have wealth. You've ended disease by deciding who gets to live. She gestured toward the lower tiers. And you've maintained order by convincing everyone that this is the best possible way things could be. That resistance is futile, that the strong should rule the weak. and that anyone who thinks differently is just too primitive to understand the truth. The representatives in the lower tiers were stirring now, some leaning forward to hear better, others looking around nervously as ideas they'd never allowed themselves to think began to surface. "But here's what you missed in your evaluation," Elena said, her voice growing stronger. "Humans don't accept that there's only one way to do things. We don't believe that might makes right, or that order is more important than freedom, or that anyone has the right to decide what we can or can't become. You've built your empire on the idea that some species are naturally superior to others, that the strong should rule and the weak should serve, that stability is worth any price. But we reject that premise entirely." High Counselor HFY felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: doubt. "What are you saying?" Elena's smile widened. "I'm saying that your evaluation was correct as far as it went. Humanity is primitive by your standards. We're small, short-lived, and technologically inferior. By every measure you use to rank civilizations, we belong at the bottom of your hierarchy." She paused, letting that acknowledgement sink in. "But we're not asking to join your hierarchy. We're here to offer an alternative to it." The words "offer an alternative" hit the council chamber like a bomb going off in slow motion. Around the vast space, representatives from hundreds of species felt their understanding of reality begin to crack. For 10,000 years, the Empire had been the only game in the galaxy. The idea that someone might propose a different way of organizing civilization was as shocking as suggesting that gravity should flow upward. High Counselor HFY's form flickered with agitation. "Alternative? Ambassador, you seem to be operating under some fundamental misunderstanding. There is no alternative to galactic civilization. The Empire represents the natural evolution of intelligent species working together for mutual benefit." "Natural?" Elena asked. "Or just the way things happen to develop here?" The question sent uncomfortable ripples through the lower tiers. Many of the species represented there had only vague memories of how their worlds had been invited to join the Empire, and those memories often involved overwhelming displays of force, followed by generous offers of protection. Admiral Vextar's voice carried a warning tone. "Human, you are beginning to sound dangerously close to sedition. The Empire has brought order to chaos, peace to conflict, and prosperity to countless worlds. To suggest that this system is somehow flawed borders on madness." "I'm not suggesting it's flawed for what it is," Elena replied calmly. "I'm suggesting that what it is might not be what everyone wants." She began walking again, her movement carrying her closer to the lower tiers where representatives of lesser species watched with growing fascination. "Your system works perfectly if you accept its basic premise that some beings are naturally superior to others and should, therefore, make decisions for everyone else. If you believe that peace is more important than freedom, that stability is more valuable than growth, and that safety is worth any price, then the Empire is indeed a wonderful achievement." Dr. Yilseth's crystalline form chimed with analytical interest. "You speak as if there are species that would prefer chaos to order. That seems evolutionarily unlikely." "Not chaos," Elena corrected. "Choice. The right to succeed or fail based on your own decisions, rather than someone else's judgment of your worth." She stopped in front of a section where several of the lower-tier species sat.
"How many of you have ideas for improving your worlds that you've never been allowed to try?"
How many of you look at the problems in your systems and think, "I know a better way to do this," but stay silent because the council has already decided the best approach? Uncomfortable shifting ran through those sections. Many eyes that had been trained on Elena suddenly found other places to look. General Korthvak's tactical mind was running threat assessments. "You are attempting to foment rebellion. The penalties for such actions are severe." "I'm not fomenting anything," Elena said. "I'm simply pointing out that your system only works as long as everyone agrees to participate in it. And for the first time in your history, someone is saying no thank you to participation." "But why?" The question came from Counselor Velthara of the Agricultural Alliance, a mid-tier species that managed food production for much of the Empire. Why would anyone choose the uncertainty of independence over the security of membership? Elena turned toward the speaker with something that might have been gratitude. "That's exactly the right question. And the answer is simple, because some things are more important than security." The chamber fell silent again as she gathered her thoughts. "You've all heard about our history, about how humans fight among themselves. What your analysis missed is what we fight about. We don't fight for territory or resources or dominance, well, not usually. We fight for ideas, for the right to believe what we want to believe, to live how we want to live, to become what we want to become. She gestured toward the upper tiers. Your system is based on the idea that there's one right way to organize a civilization, and that the wisest beings should decide what that way is. But what if you're wrong? What if there are other ways that might work better for different species? High Counselor Zephai's telepathic voice carried centuries of certainty. Our methods have been tested across millennia and countless civilizations. They work. They work for you, Elena agreed. They work for the species that happen to fit your definition of advancement. But what about everyone else? She began reciting statistics that made several council members shift uncomfortably. 47 species have been reclassified to lower tiers in the past 1,000 years due to developmental stagnation. 63 have been placed on reproductive guidance programs to prevent overpopulation. 112 have had their technological development capped because they were deemed unsuitable for advancement. Those decisions were made for the good of galactic stability. Admiral Vextar rumbled. Made by whom? For whom? Elena challenged. Who gave you the right to decide which species get to grow and which ones have to stay where they are? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Around the chamber, representatives who had never questioned the natural order of things found themselves forced to confront the mechanisms that maintain their positions. We earned that right through superior development and proven wisdom, High Counselor Zephai replied, but his usual confidence seemed somewhat strained. Did you? Or did you just get there first and decide that being first made you best? Elena's voice carried across the chamber with startling clarity. Here's what humans have learned in our short, chaotic history. No one gives you rights. You take them. No one grants you freedom. You claim it. And no one determines your worth except you. She turned to face the full assembly. Your evaluation of humanity was accurate in every detail. We are primitive, aggressive, short-lived, and technologically inferior. By your standards, we're barely qualified to exist, let alone have opinions about galactic civilization. Finally, some recognition of reality, muttered General Korthvac. But here's what you missed, Elena continued, ignoring the interruption. Those aren't weaknesses. They're features. We're primitive enough to try things you've forgotten are possible. We're aggressive enough to fight for what we believe in. We're short-lived enough to value every day of freedom over 1,000 years of comfortable servitude. And we're technologically inferior enough to remember that tools serve people, not the other way around. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the station's system seemed to have stopped. So when you offer to protect us, guide us, and gradually civilize us into proper galactic citizens, you're really offering to fix everything that makes us human. You want to teach us to accept our place, to trust our betters, to be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity you decide we deserve. Elena's voice grew stronger with each word, and we decline. Not because we don't understand the benefits of your system, but because we understand them perfectly. We decline because we'd rather fail as free beings than succeed as well-trained pets. You are making a terrible mistake, High Counselor Zephai said, his telepathic voice carrying what might have been genuine concern. Without the Empire's protection, humanity will face challenges that will destroy your species. Maybe, Elena agreed. But they'll be our challenges to face, our choices to make, our failures to learn from. She paused, looking around the vast chamber one more time. But we're not just declining membership for ourselves. We're here to offer something to every species in this chamber that's tired of being told what they can and can't become. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees as the implications of her words began to sink in. We're offering partnership instead of hierarchy, cooperation instead of subjugation, the right to succeed or fail based on your own choices instead of someone else's judgment of your worth. In the lower tiers, representatives who had spent centuries accepting their assigned roles began to look at each other with something that might have been hope. In the upper tiers, beings who had never questioned their right to rule began to realize that their entire worldview was under attack. This is sedition, Admiral Vextar declared, rising to his full imposing height. This is an attempt to destroy the order that has brought peace to the galaxy. Elena nodded calmly. You're absolutely right. We're offering every species in this chamber the chance to choose their own path instead of following yours. And if that destroys your order, Then maybe your order wasn't as stable as you thought. The silence that followed was different from the earlier pauses. This was the silence of a galaxy holding its breath, waiting to see if 10,000 years of established order was about to change forever. High Counselor HFY felt something he had never experienced before, the ground shifting beneath his feet. What exactly are you proposing? Elena smiled. I'm proposing that it's time for the galaxy to learn what humans have always known, that freedom is worth any price, that no one has the right to rule another thinking being, and that the universe is big enough for more than one way of doing things. And if the Council rejects your proposal, then we'll do what humans have always done when faced with overwhelming odds and impossible choices, Elena replied. We'll find another way. The moment of silence stretched like a held breath across the vast chamber. Then, as if reality itself was shifting, alarms began to sound throughout the council station. Not the gentle chimes that announced routine communications, but the harsh, urgent tones reserved for genuine emergencies. High Counselor HFY's consciousness immediately connected to the station's information network. What he found there made his ethereal form flicker, with something approaching panic. Impossible, he whispered, his telepathic voice carrying to every mind in the chamber. Admiral Vextar was already accessing military channels through his armor's communication systems. The data flooding in contradicted everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. Council Leader, we have a situation. Multiple human vessels are appearing throughout the galaxy, not just in their home system, everywhere. Elena Vasquez remained calm at the center of the chamber as chaos began to erupt around her. Ambassador, High Counselor HFY demanded, what is the meaning of this? Our scans showed humanity had barely achieved primitive spaceflight. Your scans were accurate, Elena replied. 3 months ago, that's all we had. But you see, while you were preparing to evaluate us, we were conducting our own evaluation. The main holographic display activated, showing real-time reports from across the galaxy. Human ships, crude by galactic standards but functional, were appearing at worlds throughout the Empire. Not attacking, not threatening, simply arriving and broadcasting messages. What you observed during your assessment was our public face, Elena continued. What you didn't see was what we built in private. While you were measuring our current limitations, we were working to transcend them. Dr. Yilseth's analytical mind struggled to process the data. The timeline is impossible. Our surveillance detected no advanced construction, no significant resource allocation, no technological breakthroughs that would enable faster-than-light travel on this scale. Because you were looking for the wrong things, Elena explained. You expected us to develop technology the way your species did, slowly, carefully, with proper oversight and gradual improvement. But humans don't work that way. When we decide something needs to be done, we don't wait for permission. General Korthvak's tactical display showed the scope of the human operation. Over 400 vessels confirmed appearing at systems throughout the galaxy. This level of coordination requires communication networks and manufacturing capabilities far beyond our estimates. Your estimates were based on what you could see from outside our system, Elena said. But humans have learned to be very good at hiding things from those who might disapprove of our projects. The Chamber's emergency communication system activated, bringing in frantic reports from across the Empire. A junior Corvin officer's voice cut through the noise. Admiral, the human vessels are not attacking. They're talking, broadcasting messages to the planetary populations. What kind of messages? Vextar demanded. Elena answered before the officer could respond. We're telling them what we told you. That there's another way. That they don't have to accept the limitations others place on them. That partnership is possible without hierarchy. High Counselor HFY felt his millennia of certainty crumbling. You're attempting to destroy galactic civilization. No, Elena corrected. We're offering to expand it. To show that there's more than one way for intelligent species to work together. The reports continued flooding in. On agricultural worlds, human representatives were demonstrating farming techniques that increased yields without requiring council oversight. On mining planets, they were sharing extraction methods that improved safety while reducing environmental damage. On manufacturing centers, they were proposing production systems that gave workers more control over their conditions. Councillor Velthara of the Agricultural Alliance leaned forward. These techniques, some of them are theoretically sound, But they've never been tried because they require too much individual initiative. Our efficiency models showed they would create chaos. Your efficiency models assumed people needed to be controlled, Elena replied. Ours assume they want to contribute. Different assumptions lead to different results. In the lower tiers, representatives were beginning to whisper among themselves. For the first time in centuries, they were hearing about possibilities beyond their assigned roles. Species that had been classified as unsuitable for advancement were learning about technologies that might change that status. Worlds that had been deemed resource extraction only were discovering new ways to use their natural advantages. Admiral Vextar's military mind focused on the immediate threat. Even if your proposals have merit, this coordinated action represents a challenge to established order. That cannot be permitted. By whom? Elena asked. Who gave you the authority to prevent free beings from choosing their own associations? The Council represents the collective wisdom of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. High Counselor HFY replied, but his voice lacked its usual absolute confidence. The Council represents the civilizations that happen to get powerful first, Elena corrected. That's not the same thing as wisdom. More reports arrived. On the Zexian homeworld, a species classified as technological development inappropriate, human engineers were working with local inventors to solve problems the Council had declared unsolvable. On Thyrus Prime, designated as a cultural preservation zone, artists were collaborating on new forms of expression that blended traditional methods with innovative approaches. General Korthvak studied the tactical display with growing alarm. The pattern is becoming clear. They're not trying to conquer or control. They're offering alternatives to every major policy the Council has implemented. If even a fraction of these proposals prove successful, then maybe our policies weren't as perfect as we thought, finished Counselor Hicksron of the Synthetic Collective, her mechanical voice carrying what sounded suspiciously like doubt. Elena nodded. Every species you've classified as limited has capabilities you never bothered to explore because they didn't fit your development model. Every world you've designated as single purpose has potential you never recognized because it didn't match your efficiency standards. The Chamber's communication system chimed with another incoming message. This time it came from the Bravak homeworld, one of the lowest tier species in the Empire. The voice was nervous but determined. Council leader, we request permission to negotiate new partnership agreements with the human delegation. Permission denied. Admiral Vextar responded immediately. All negotiations with the humans are suspended pending Council review. With respect, Admiral, came the reply. We're not asking to leave the Empire. We're asking to explore additional relationships. The humans aren't demanding exclusivity. Elena smiled. That's right. We're not asking anyone to choose between the Empire and humanity. We're offering them the choice to choose. High Counselor HFY felt the foundations of galactic order shifting beneath him. This will lead to chaos. Without central coordination, without proper oversight, the galaxy will fragment into competing factions, or it will grow into something richer and more complex than any single organization could create, Elena suggested. You've built something impressive here, High Counselor. A stable, peaceful, efficient system that's lasted for millennia. But stability isn't the only virtue a civilization can have. The reports kept coming. Species after species was requesting clarification about their rights to form independent relationships. Worlds were asking about the possibility of changing their designated roles. For the first time in galactic history, the carefully maintained hierarchy was being questioned not by rebels or conquerors, but by people offering alternatives. Dr. Yilseth accessed her database of social models. The mathematical implications are staggering. If even a small percentage of species begin operating outside the current system, the ripple effects could destabilize everything. Or create something better. Elena said quietly. Change is scary, Doctor, but it's also how things improve. Admiral Vextar's communication array showed fleet movements across the galaxy as Corvin ships moved to intercept human vessels. But the reports from those encounters were troubling. The humans weren't resisting, weren't fighting back. They were simply continuing their conversations with local populations and withdrawing when asked to leave. They're not behaving like invaders, reported Captain Thaxmore from the Rigel sector. They're behaving like missionaries. Missionaries for what? demanded General Korthvak, Elena answered. For the idea that everyone deserves a choice about their own future. The chamber fell silent as the full implications of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't a military invasion or a political coup. It was something far more dangerous to the established order. It was an idea. And ideas once released were impossible to contain with ships or soldiers. High Counselor Zephi looked down at the small human standing calmly in the center of his vast chamber of power. What do you want from us? Nothing, Elena replied. We don't want anything from you. We want something for the galaxy. The chance to see what it could become if every species was free to reach its full potential. And if we refuse to permit this? Expansion of relationships?